The night of my engagement party was supposed to be perfect. Emma stood in a white dress glowing under the garden lights, and I remember thinking I was the luckiest man alive. We had been together for 3 years and this was our moment. But something felt wrong. When I saw Emma's mother Margaret hand her a glass of red wine with that strange smile, my stomach turned. I did not understand why at the time. That smile would haunt me for months. Before I continue this story, let me ask you something. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below. If you have ever had a gut feeling that saved you or someone you love, hit that like button, and make sure you subscribe so you do not miss stories like this one. Because what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about family trust and the lengths some people will go to destroy the ones closest to them. To understand why that night became a nightmare, I need to tell you about Emma and her family from the beginning. I met Emma at a coffee shop in Portland, Oregon on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. She was sitting by the window sketching furniture designs in a notebook, and something about the way she concentrated made me walk over and introduce myself. She worked at an interior design firm downtown. I was a software engineer at a tech startup. We talked for 3 hours that first day, and I knew she was different from anyone I had ever met. Over 3 years of dating, I learned that Emma was strong, independent, and fiercely loyal. But I also learned she carried deep wounds from her family. She rarely talked about her mother. When I asked, she would just say, "My mom is complicated." I did not push. I figured she would tell me when she was ready. I only met Margaret 3 times before the engagement party. Each time she was polite, almost too polite. She would smile at me, ask about my job, compliment my shoes. But when she looked at Emma, something shifted in her eyes. There was a coldness there, a distance that did not match how a mother should look at her daughter. I noticed it but told myself I was imagining things. Emma's father Richard had passed away 3 years before we met. Heart attack, sudden and unexpected. He was only 58 years old. Emma told me he was the one person in her family who truly understood her. His death broke something inside her that she was still trying to repair. What Emma did not tell me until much later was about the will. Richard had left his estate divided between Emma, her younger sister Haley, and a charitable foundation he supported. Margaret received a monthly allowance from a trust fund, but she did not have control over the principal. The trust was managed by Emma. Richard had done this on purpose. He knew Margaret had problems with money. She had a gambling habit she could not control, and she spent recklessly when she was emotional. He loved his wife, but he did not trust her with their children's future. Margaret never forgave Emma for this arrangement. Once Emma told me her mother had said, "Having my own daughter control my money is humiliating. Your father did this to punish me from the grave." Emma tried to explain that she was just following her father's wishes, but Margaret refused to listen. Haley, Emma's younger sister, was 24 years old and still lived with Margaret. She was sweet and naive, always seeing the best in people, especially her mother. Whenever Emma expressed concerns about Margaret's behavior, Haley would defend her. "Mom is just sad because Dad is gone," she would say. "Give her time." Emma stopped trying to explain. The engagement party was held at Emma's grandmother's house. Dorothy was 82 years old, sharp as a tack, and the only person in Emma's family I genuinely liked. Her home was a beautiful Victorian on 3 acres outside the city with gardens that she still tended herself despite her age. Dorothy pulled me aside a week before the party. She held my hand and looked at me with those wise, tired eyes. "You take care of my Emma," she said. "That girl deserves happiness after everything she has been through." I asked her what she meant, what Emma had been through. Dorothy just shook her head and changed the subject. I did not push, but her words stayed with me. The day of the party, Margaret arrived 2 hours earlier than expected. I was helping the caterers set up tables when her car pulled into the driveway. She got out alone, carrying a large bag, and went straight into the house without greeting anyone. About an hour later, I went inside to get a glass of water. The kitchen was supposed to be empty, but Margaret was there, standing at the counter with her back to me. When I said hello, she jumped like I had caught her doing something wrong. I saw her quickly slide a small bottle into her purse. "Just my vitamins," she said with a nervous laugh. "I get tired easily these days." I nodded and got my water. As I left, I looked back and saw her watching me with an expression I could not read. The image of that small bottle stayed in my mind, but I pushed it away. It was supposed to be a happy day. By 7 in the evening, nearly 50 guests had arrived. The garden was lit with string lights, a jazz trio played soft music, and Emma looked absolutely radiant in her white dress. Haley was there as the unofficial maid of honor, already buzzing around with endless energy, making sure everyone had drinks and knew where to find the appetizers. Margaret stood in a corner near the rose bushes watching everything. She held a glass of champagne but barely sipped it. Every time I looked over, she was staring at Emma with that same cold expression I had noticed before. Her smile never reached her eyes. Around 9 o'clock, I was talking with my uncle about his fishing trip when I noticed movement across the garden. Margaret was walking toward Emma carrying 2 glasses of red wine. She moved slowly, deliberately, like she was approaching something important. I watched as Margaret reached Emma and handed her one of the glasses. She leaned in and whispered something in Emma's ear. Emma looked surprised, then confused. This was unusual. Margaret rarely initiated physical closeness with Emma. Then Margaret did something I had never seen her do. She placed her hand on Emma's shoulder and gently stroked it, a gesture of maternal affection that seemed completely foreign coming from her. Emma raised the glass toward her lips, but then she stopped. Her nose wrinkled slightly and she lowered the glass without drinking. Margaret said something else. I could not hear from where I was standing, but I saw Emma smile and nod. Margaret patted her shoulder one more time and walked away, disappearing into the crowd near the house. I started to move toward Emma, but my uncle grabbed my arm to finish his story about the salmon that got away. By the time I politely extracted myself, 10 minutes had passed. I found Emma standing near the dessert table with Haley. Something had changed. Emma was holding a glass of soda water, clear and fizzy. Haley was holding a glass of red wine. I thought your mom gave you wine, I said to Emma, keeping my voice casual. Emma glanced at Haley, then took my hand and led me to a quiet corner behind the garden shed. Her face was serious in a way that made my chest tighten. That wine smelled wrong, she whispered. I know wine. I have been drinking it since I was 18. That glass had something else in it. Something bitter like medicine. My mind flashed to the small bottle I had seen Margaret hide in her purse. Why did you give it to Haley? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Emma looked down. She came over and said my wine looked good. She asked if she could have it since I was not drinking. I did not think. I just wanted to get rid of it. I handed it to her before I could stop myself. We need to get that glass back, I said. I know, but I want to see how my mother reacts when she realizes I did not drink it. Maybe I am wrong. Maybe it is just old wine that turned. I wanted to argue, to demand we do something immediately, but Emma squeezed my hand and led me back to the party. For the next 30 minutes, I could not focus on a single conversation. My eyes kept finding Haley in the crowd. She was laughing with one of Emma's cousins near the fountain. Then she was taking photos with Dorothy. Then she was sitting down on a garden bench rubbing her forehead. I moved closer, pretending to admire the roses nearby. Haley was saying something to the woman next to her about feeling dizzy. The color was draining from her face. Sweat was forming on her forehead despite the cool evening air. I started walking toward her, but before I could get there, Haley tried to stand up. Her legs buckled underneath her like they were made of paper. She collapsed onto the stone pathway. I ran. I reached her just as Emma came sprinting from the other direction. Haley was lying on her back, eyes closed, breathing shallow and rapid. Her lips were turning a shade of blue that made my stomach drop. Call 911, I shouted. The party erupted into chaos. Guests crowded around, then backed away when they realized this was serious. Dorothy pushed through the crowd, her face white with fear. And Margaret came running from the house, her heels clicking against the patio stones. When Margaret saw Haley lying there instead of Emma, she stopped dead in her tracks. For one terrible moment, I saw her face transform. Her eyes went wide, her mouth opened slightly, and she looked at Emma with an expression of pure shock. Then she looked back at Haley, and something like horror crossed her features. Call an ambulance! Margaret screamed, too loud, too late. I was already on the phone with the dispatcher describing Haley's symptoms: shallow breathing, bluish lips, loss of consciousness, possible seizure activity. The ambulance took 15 minutes to arrive. Those 15 minutes felt like hours. Haley's body twitched once, twice. Dorothy knelt beside her granddaughter, holding her hand and praying softly. Emma stood frozen, staring at her mother with eyes that held a question she was afraid to ask. The paramedics loaded Haley onto a stretcher and rushed her to the ambulance. Emma and Margaret climbed in after her. As the doors closed, Emma looked at me through the small window, and I saw the fear in her eyes. I drove to the hospital with Dorothy in the passenger seat. Neither of us spoke. There was nothing to say that would not make the situation more terrifying than it already was. At the emergency room, they told us Haley was being treated and we needed to wait. Emma sat in a plastic chair, still in her white engagement dress, now wrinkled and stained with grass from where she had knelt beside her sister. Margaret paced back and forth near the vending machines. A doctor came out after an hour and asked if Haley had taken any substances. Drugs, medications, anything unusual. "Just wine," Margaret said quickly. "She only had some wine at the party." The doctor nodded and went back through the double doors. Emma watched her mother with an expression I had never seen before. It was suspicion mixed with something darker, something like grief, for a truth she did not want to accept. I touched Emma's arm and nodded toward the hallway. We walked until we found an empty corridor near the chapel. "You are thinking what I am thinking," I said. It was not a question. Emma's eyes filled with tears. I do not want to believe it, but my mother handed me that glass. She watched me raise it to my lips. And when Haley collapsed instead of me, you saw her face. She was shocked. Not worried. Shocked. I told Emma about the small bottle I had seen Margaret hide in the kitchen. Her hands started shaking. "We need proof," I said. "Before we accuse anyone, we need to know for sure." "The glass," Emma said. I set it down on the dessert table before Haley took it. There might still be some wine left. We decided to go back to Dorothy's house. If the glass was still there, we could have it tested. If not, we would figure out another way. Dorothy's house was dark and empty when we arrived. The caterers had packed up and left, but the dishes were still piled in the kitchen waiting to be washed the next day. Dorothy gave us her key before we left the hospital. We searched the kitchen systematically. Glasses were stacked in the sink on the counter on a tray near the back door. Finally, I found it. A wine glass still half full of red wine sitting alone on the far end of the counter. "This is it," Emma said. "I remember setting it here." I found an empty plastic water bottle, rinsed it out, and carefully poured the wine inside. We sealed it and put it in Emma's purse. Then Emma did something I did not expect. She walked to the coat closet near the front door where Margaret had hung her jacket earlier in the evening. Her purse was still there, forgotten in the chaos. Emma opened the purse and pulled out a small brown bottle. The label was typed, not printed. It was a prescription medication, but the name was unfamiliar to me. Dorothy had come into the room behind us. When she saw the bottle, she sat down heavily on the nearest chair. "That is a powerful sedative," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Very powerful. An overdose can stop your heart." Emma stared at her grandmother. "How do you know that?" Dorothy was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was heavy with decades of secrets. "Because your mother tried to kill herself with that exact medication 20 years ago. And before that, she tried to give it to her sister." The story Dorothy told us that night changed everything Emma thought she knew about her mother. Margaret had always struggled with mental illness, depression, paranoia, and something darker that was never officially diagnosed. When she was young, she became convinced that her older sister was their parents' favorite. The jealousy consumed her. One Christmas, Margaret put sedatives in her sister's eggnog. Her sister survived but spent 3 days in the hospital. The family covered it up, paid for Margaret's treatment, and never spoke of it again. Richard knew about this history before he married Margaret. He believed she had changed, that love and stability would heal her. For many years it seemed like he was right. But the gambling started after their children were born, and the old paranoia began creeping back. "Your father wrote his will the way he did because he was afraid," Dorothy said to Emma. "He knew Margaret might hurt you girls if she had full control. He hoped the structure would protect you." Emma was crying silently, tears streaming down her face. "She tried to kill me, her own daughter." "We need to tell the doctors what was in that wine," I said. "They need to know how to treat Haley." We drove back to the hospital. I called the police from the car. Haley was stable but still unconscious when we arrived. The doctors confirmed that her blood showed extremely high levels of a sedative, consistent with the medication in Margaret's purse. If we had waited any longer, her heart might have stopped. Margaret was sitting alone in the waiting room when we walked in. She looked up and saw Emma holding the small brown bottle. "Where did you get that?" Margaret asked, her voice cracking. Emma walked slowly toward her mother, stopping a few feet away. "You gave me this wine tonight." You wanted me to drink it. You wanted me to collapse at my own engagement party. Or maybe you wanted more than that. Margaret's face twisted. For a moment she looked like she might deny everything. Then something broke inside her. You think you are so perfect, she hissed. Daddy's little girl. The responsible one. The one who gets to control everything while I beg for scraps from my own daughter. I almost died tonight, Emma said, her voice shaking but firm. Haley almost died because of you. I just wanted you to sleep, Margaret said, and now she was crying, two ugly sobs that shook her whole body. I wanted to ruin your perfect night. I did not think about the dose. I did not think. You never think, Emma said. And people get hurt. The police arrived minutes later. They listened to our story, took the evidence, and read Margaret her rights. As they led her out of the hospital in handcuffs, she looked back at Emma one last time. I am your mother, she said. Emma did not respond. She just turned away and walked back to her sister's room. Haley woke up 2 days later with no permanent damage. The doctors said she was lucky. Another hour without treatment and the outcome could have been very different. When Haley learned what had happened, she did not believe it at first. She kept saying there must be a mistake, that their mother would never do something like this. It took weeks of therapy and a long conversation with Dorothy before she finally accepted the truth. Margaret was charged with aggravated assault and reckless endangerment. Her lawyers argued for a psychiatric evaluation, and she was eventually sentenced to mandatory treatment at a mental health facility. She will be there for at least 5 years, possibly longer. Emma and I postponed our wedding. She needed time to process everything, to grieve the mother she thought she had, and accept the one who actually existed. I told her I would wait as long as she needed. I meant it. For months, Emma blamed herself. She wondered if she had been a better daughter, if she had tried harder to connect with Margaret, maybe things would have been different. Her therapist helped her understand that Margaret's illness was not her fault and not her responsibility to fix. Slowly, Emma began to heal. She started painting again, something she had given up years ago. She reconnected with old friends she had pushed away. She learned to set boundaries and to protect her peace. 6 months after that terrible night, we got married in Dorothy's garden. It was a small ceremony, just 20 people who truly loved us. Haley stood beside Emma as her maid of honor, stronger than she had ever been. Dorothy sat in the front row, dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief. There was an empty chair in the second row with a single white rose on the seat. Emma put it there for Margaret, not as forgiveness but as acknowledgement. Margaret was still her mother, even if that relationship could never be what Emma once hoped. I used to believe that family was the safest place in the world. I thought the people who raised you would always protect you, always want the best for you. That night at our engagement party taught me that blood does not guarantee loyalty, and love can be twisted into something unrecognizable. But Emma taught me something else. She showed me that surviving betrayal does not mean becoming bitter. It means learning to trust yourself, to listen to your instincts, to build a new family from the people who prove they deserve to be there. If Emma had drunk that wine, she might not be here today. Something made her pause, made her notice the strange smell, made her question her mother's sudden affection. That instinct saved her life. So I want to ask you something. If you discovered that someone you loved, someone you trusted completely, had done something unforgivable, what would you do? Would you stay silent to keep the peace, or would you face the truth, no matter how much it hurt? For Emma and me, the answer was clear. The truth nearly destroyed us, but it also set us free. If this story touched you, please leave a comment below and tell me what you would have done in Emma's situation. Hit the like button if you believe in trusting your instincts. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story. And share this video with someone who needs to hear that they are not alone, that surviving family trauma is possible, and that healing is always within reach. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being part of this community. I wish you strength in your own journey, courage to face your own truths, and people who love you exactly as you are. Until next time, take care of yourselves and the ones who matter most.